Did you tell him the first time the story?
What was that?
That you sat up in the bed the night?
Oh yes, well I don't think that's anything got to do with. This mightn't be anything got to do with.
You have to tell us now.
Well, when I was doing the research on the O'Neills, and I found where they were buried, except for one woman, and her name was Kate, but she was married to an O'Neill. I could not find her headstone here anywhere. So I was at home one night and in bed anyway. 3 o'clock in the morning, I sat up in the bed and I said, Paddy, I know where that woman is buried. And he says, did you ever lie down and have a good sleep for yourself? I said, will you come with me the next morning? And he said, no, I won't. I said, well, I'll go on my own. So I went on my own. And down at the end there, I found the headstone.
Buried with her own.
Buried her own people. Yeah. Could you blame her, like, she didn't want to be with the O'Neills.
Paddy and Eilish are just two of the committed locals who volunteer time at Clopook Church, and this group approached then Laois Heritage Officer Catherine Casey to find out if the council could support their work.
A couple of years ago they got on to me to say we're worried about what's under the ivy. So they were on my mind as a group that I wanted to get back to if we ever had the money. So they were kind of an obvious choice again, and luckily we did, because that's one particular site where when we did start very carefully revealing the ivy to start the masonry conservation, it was actually in really, really bad condition. And it's one of those ones that could have someday in a storm just been a pile of stones.
Once money from the Just Transition Fund became available, Catherine included Clopook in a conservation and pollinator programme that meant essential work could begin on this ancient site.
The church at Clopook is actually quite a significant site. It's significant because Clopook in itself is quite important. The townland name is Clopook, which is the stone of the fairy. That association is actually, it derives from the Hillfort site, a natural rock outcrop that is just situated to the north of the church. And that's a very, very important site in the kind of history and archaeology of Laois.
This is a two-cell church, which is that it has a main nave and it has a chancel. The churches from the Gaelic period or the early Christian period were all single-cell churches. And then with the arrival of the Anglo-Normans in the 12th century, they either built new two-cell churches, or they often took an existing single-cell church and modified it. It's very hard to tell accurately on some of these sites whether that happened or not, but this could have been an early Christian site with a single-cell church and was then extended with a chancel on this end when the Anglo-Normans arrived. It's not in bad nick, and it has a very interesting cross wall, or chancel wall as we call it, which divides the nave from the chancel, which is in need of repair.
Fiona McGowan was the lead ecologist on this project, and while recognising that ivy had to be removed to preserve the site, she also recognises its unique role in promoting biodiversity.
The big important part of this project, working on the graveyards, is to do with trying to protect and enhance the church structures that have been left to us. I mean, they're so ancient, they have so much to tell us, and they're such evocative places, but by the same token, ivy is of huge biodiversity in Ireland, and the reason being it's one of the only very few evergreen species that we have that's native, and therefore, you know, it can host all sorts of plants or all sorts of animals. I mean, bats and butterflies and that will hibernate over the winter time.
John Lonrigan of Revamp Conservation was next in to remove the dead ivy and begin the process of conserving the walls under the guidance of conservation architects.
These walls were engrossed with ivy throughout, and in order to treat it and to kill it off, it's a slow process, so they commissioned others to come and use eco plugs and treat the ivy, and luckily enough then they sourced the funding there to do the conservation works, and then we were brought in to remove what was dead and get out as much of the root systems as we could that were in the core of the wall and on the face of the wall.
You're taking a lot of vegetation out of these walls. All that vegetation, the roots, have basically displaced all the mortar. So you're like that when you're getting back to this level, you've huge holes or gaps or a depth of mortar loss that has to be reinstated.
Yeah, deep repointing, and that has to come in layers. If when you're repointing, you can't just put 100 mil of pointing and finish it. Sure. It'll shrink back, it'll crack, you know. So that'll have to be brought out in layers.
The cross wall of Clopook has completely open joints all across its wall top. That's quite a tall wall and it's quite exposed, and that's urgent now that we get on to the next round of works and repoint and consolidate that wall, or we're at risk of losing some masonry from it.
Meanwhile, Fiona McGowan continued working with the locals, focusing on the future management of the maintenance of the graveyard.
What we will be recommending is that these areas and kind of further over around the graves will be cut maybe kind of once every month, but in that way then the small little wildflowers like the little daisies, buttercups, the clover species, in the summertime the lovely purple self-heals, the blue speedwells, they will all be able to flower, because in an area, say, you know, in most lawns that might be cut once a week or once every 2 weeks, those flowers don't get a chance to flower. Whereas if you leave it for about a month, they'll get a chance to flower and to set seed, and you know that's brilliant for pollinators, and it's so important.
The building work here has been completed, and the locals have embraced new practices around maintenance, while at the same time they continue to explore the secrets of the graveyard.
Well, a bit of a special torch, quite a strong torch, like. But like in the day, like some of the stones were so, it wouldn't be always possible to read them. Like there'd be certain stones, but at night you could cast the shadow across the stone. You know, just put the light, you know, across the stone, but across the stone, and you get the shadow. Now, it was a great help for reading the stone. But no, I'm not saying it was easy. Like, but normally there'd be stones ticked off that couldn't be read during the day. So they're designated for nighttime reading.
There are some really interesting headstones, and we still haven't even gotten to see all of them, just because we're probably more focused on the ruin. But we did find a very nice one in Clopook, which was it was lovely quality letter cutting, and it was carved to colloquial rustic lettering. So we were able to kind of take a rubbing off it and transcribe it. So we have it in our report, and it's the headstone of John Lawler. And it says, "John Lawler, to my great sorrow, is dead, and in this narrow grave takes his rest. Let everyone that reads this pray God rest his soul in heaven. Amen. He died April ye 9th, 1716, in ye 16th year of his age. So he was born in 1700, which is 322 years ago. And this grave is over 300 years old. A wonderful memorial, just full of memory and grief, and you know, just you can feel the pain of the man who carved this, who was probably a relative of the young lad who died in his 16th year.
What I find is really interesting is that there's the core community group that were involved in the project itself, but they felt a real responsibility to the wider community to let them know what happened, let them know what work was done, how money was spent. I think that's really reflective of you know, the fundamentals of this project, the idea of communities helping to protect and restore these sites.
The locals at Clopook have been working here for years, and the Just Transition funding means their efforts have been recognised. And now the wider community gets to learn more about this unique spot.